Hello, everybody. Welcome to TED Talks. I am Ted Davies, and welcome to Ted Davies Artistry, the YouTube channel. If you aren't subscribed yet, please do. I think it's going to be really interesting. We do a full variety of different things on Ted Davies Artistry, but today what we're going to do is it's a pre-recorded show because this guest I've been wanting to have on for a long time, and like a lot of people, they're back to the grind at work now. Things are happening, and the world's still not normal, but it's becoming a little bit normal. So I wanted to have this guest on. His name is Matt Roybal, and he is awesome. He's a collector. I think that you guys are really going to find a very interesting avenue of collecting, of what he has done, in a very interesting niche, almost kitsch form of comic book collecting. But I want you guys to see it because I think it's really a fascinating journey, and I want you to be part of it. But first, let's talk about our coffee journey. We've got Indian River Roasting Company, and today we've got espresso in the coffee cup. Let's learn about Indian River Roasting Company. Here at Ted Davies Artistry, we take coffee seriously, and so does our sponsor, Indian River Roasting Company. It's fair trade, organic, and they're artisans just like me. The only difference is I use watercolor and ink and they use coffee beans, and I enjoy it all through my day. So do yourself a favor, go to the description when you like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Find Indian River Roasting Company's website, use the promo code CaffeinateTed2021, and save 10% on your purchase. Yeah, you can find the website under the description in the channel. And also use that promo code CaffeinateTed2021. It'll help you save 10% on your purchase. Check out everything that they're doing. Also, we want to talk about Cashman's Comics in Bay City, Michigan. Cashman's is a staple diet down there, and they are awesome. John's great. Check out everything he does. Hold on one second. Wrong one. Hold on one second.
Every night and every day I wake up feeling the same way now. Need to find something to believe. Every night the dreams we made, they're haunting my head now.
Yeah, check out everything that John's doing. He sells my work down there. He sells a lot of indie published work down there too. Say hi to Petey the dog when you go down there as well, and tell them both that TED Talk sent you. Sure, they send everything nationwide, so check out everything they're doing. If you're a novice collector or a seasoned collector like myself, so check out everything they're doing. John's amazing. So we also want to talk about the Da Vinci of resin, Damian Walbram. He is awesome. He does all of my figures for my work on my books, and he's an awesome person. So check out everything he's doing. Wait one second. Here's one of the figures that he did. I don't know if you guys can see it or not here, but figures that he did for my up and coming series, Grimm Book 101. Or excuse me, Grimm 101 Book 2. But yeah, this is one of the figures that he did for me. I hand painted all of it, and that was part of the Kickstarter promo that we did. So we're working on those right now and get them out to our people that invested all the pledgers. So we also have Comics Unlimited. Glenn B. Fleming is an awesome publisher from the UK. He has been kind enough to sponsor our show as well. Everything that's going on with Comics Unlimited is great for indie publishing as well as some of the older stuff that we all grew up with. Really interesting articles. Excellent. You can find them on Glenn B. Fleming on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken, and check out everything that they're doing. They do a really just an awesome publication. A lot of really good artists in this, a lot of good people in general, and a lot of great articles on comic books. So, with no further ado, let's bring in the man of the hour, Matt. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Doing really good.
I'm sorry
Don't be
about the whole.
confused. Don't be confused about Define 999. That's my nom de guerre.
Okay, gotcha. Well, listen, every time that we start TED Talks, we talk about the question. We started out was, when did you land on this planet? When did they drop you off?
May 25th, 1977, in Roswell, New Mexico. The aliens
Really?
never left. Damn it.
You're
They are
from
still
Roswell. No-
there. Yes,
That's
I am
awesome.
from Roswell.
That's awesome. Well, that's it. That's the show. Thanks.
There's the
Thank you.
interview.
That's it.
I'm an alien.
We we did a show on the Truth Mongers with Glenn B. Fleming about Roswell and what happened, and
Oh, nice.
the background. I'm sure you could tell us stories and stories.
Oh,
We
I
won't get
have
into-
stories.
Yeah, we won't get into that on this show, but we will bring you back on that, absolutely.
Yeah, and you need to, because I'll talk about exploring the abandoned Atlas II ICBM missile silos that are strategically located around Roswell. And when I went to military school, one of our favorite things was going and exploring those. We're talking real life Goonies here, dude.
Wow. All right. Well, okay, it's a date then. We'll do that. We'll bring you in the future. We'll bring you back.
And I've got plenty of photos and stories and the whole 9 yards.
Awesome. Today, while you're here, is I wanted people to find out, who Matt is, because a lot of people don't really, I don't think that they're really aware of what type of market you have and what you've done with the market. You kind of developed this, from what I'm seeing and what I've seen the last 6 months. You've built a market on a very unique collection, a way of collecting.
Yes.
Why don't you tell them, if it was a elevator pitch to sell me on how to do this, what is it that you do that I find so interesting? Tell them.
Okay. So, well, for starters, it wasn't just me.
Okay.
Actually, this style of collecting comic books was actually started by two people a while back that kind of took me under their wing. But basically what it is we collect foreign edition comic books of American comic books. Now, they could be key, they could be classic cover, they could be whatever you want. But we find out, me and the collectors that do this, go all over the globe to find these books and bring them back into one solitary spot on the planet. Now, of course, we're not multimillionaires. We're not traveling around the world. This style of collecting comic books would never have been possible without the internet, without the global internet and, that shrinking of the world. Because before the internet, if a comic book was, let's say, was printed in the Philippines, it might as well be on the other side of Mars for most.
Oh yeah,
people, right?
Oh yeah. There's no way.
There were some people that were doing. There was a famous Classics Illustrated collector that had been doing it since the 50s, and he would send letters all over the world to people to acquire foreign Classics Illustrated. So there were people kind of doing it, but the unique part of this part of the hobby can be explained real quickly. Okay, I'm going to do it right now.
Cool.
Let's say Amazing Spider-Man 129, right?
Okay.
It's a key book. It's the first Punisher. We've all seen that classic key book, but have you seen the finish?
Yeah. No.
Or the second Mexican? Or the first Mexican?
That's crazy.
Or the Swedish? Or the second Greek? Or the Spanish?
Wow.
Or the first Greek? Or the Dutch? Or the Italian?
Jeez.
Or the Brazilian white? Or the super rare, what we call conflict comics, Colombian? Or one of the interesting ones, the former Yugoslavia. And why do we call it former Yugoslavia, Ted?
Because it's no longer Yugoslavia.
Because Yugoslavia was shattered into a million pieces because of the Bosnian Serb War. That is in a nutshell what we do. That is one style, though, of course. That is the set building style.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing. Later in the show, I picked out 3 books that I wanted to talk specifically about. You know,
Yes.
one of the things we have to remember about foreign comic books is that, you know, as Americans, we see comics for what they are, right? They are informative. They are a piece of pop culture. They are a collectible, right?
Yep.
They are they carry value. We worship the art. I mean, who
Sure.
doesn't like that classic Spider-Man
Yeah, I know. I
129
mean,
art?
it's a
I
given.
mean,
Yeah.
it's a
It's
given.
our,
Those are all givens.
Yeah.
But, and I'll explain it in this way, you have to understand that foreign books also are cultural artifacts. Now, your viewers might be going, what the hell's that? Well, let me explain it. There's stories behind the books, behind the publishers, behind the stuff. I'll give you an example. This is a Greek book. This is the Greek 129. It's Cabanas Hellas. Hellas is Greek. Cabanas was the man. He was the publisher that brought them. He was publishing Marvel Bronze Age books, and he brought them to Greece in the late 70s. Now, the reason there's a lot of things about Greece that are connected to this book, and one of them is that we supported the military junta in Greece, and the military junta in Greece was not nice. They took people and they pulled them out of their homes, and they disappeared. So if you are a kid in Greece in the late 70s and you see a Marvel superhero comic book on the stands, let's say Captain America, right? And you remember that your grandpop was removed from his home, possibly killed, gone, never seen again. Do you think that you have warm and fuzzies towards America
No.
because they supported the military junta? Hell no.
No.
So that's what I mean by there's stories that are behind the books that are like cultural artifacts that relate to that time. And guess what? Cabanas Hellas wasn't popular in Greece. A majority of these books got unsold, they got returned to the publisher, and they got pulped. How do we know that? Because we know people that were around at the time that knew the publishers, that were friends with some of the publishers' kids. That's another part of this thing. It's not just collecting comics. So there's a historical element to it.
And it's a time stamp too. So now you've got, are these are licensed through Marvel? These weren't like bootlegs.
Yes, these were licensed through Marvel, the Greeks. But I say licensed in a loose way. We're so used to the big, the Disney and the 20th century. We're so used to their armies of lawyers controlling the narrative on their properties, right? Their intellectual properties. But back then, pre-internet, all Marvel and DC cared about was that the check cashed, right?
Yeah.
They didn't care what these publishers did with these beloved superheroes. Not really.
Yeah.
All they saw their foreign licensing departments as were as big ATMs. And that's why you end up with the Japanese Playboy Spideys, the non-canon Spider-Mans, all kinds of weird, twisted shit. Because pre-internet, like we said, if you licensed a comic book to be printed over on the other side of the world on the Philippines,
who's going to check? I mean, you're going to send one of your rep guys out there? Come on. No. They might have. I'm just saying. I'm trying to, I can't see this. I want to see if I'm bringing up the right one here. This, the Avengers. I just wanted to throw, let me see. There's another one.
It's a classic example of set building. Yes.
You're right. And I just wanted to show people the different variations on what is available in the marketplace on all of it, but we didn't have a Spider-Man when we do on the later ones. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to give people give people a overbroad look. Listen.
Yeah. And you could see the sets back there. And
it's incredible.
And the thing, and the other part of this too, that's different from traditional comic book collecting is in traditional comic book collecting, all you got to do is go to eBay. All you need is money.
Right.
It's not like it was in the 60s, right?
Right.
But let me explain a little bit how I got into this.
Yeah, please do.
Because it's important.
Yeah.
So I've been collecting comics. I have been collecting comics since I was a kid. I grew up in the Copper Age. All the classic Copper Age books. The Frank Miller Wolvie Limited One, the Limited Series, the Punny Limited Series, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm a Copper Age kid. Okay.
Yep.
I collected books. As I got older, I started caring more about girls and getting laid. I'm jealous of the comic geeks of today because being a comic geek when I grew up, we had to hide that shit, or we weren't getting laid. I know. Right?
I remember.
We were not getting girlfriends. I kept my comic book collection, kept it on ice. Post speculative crash, I sold it. I think, to
We
get
did. Yeah. I sold a lot of stuff too.
I
Yeah.
sold it. I needed money for something. But then, later on down the line, I kind of fell back into collecting, started collecting again, started doing the whole thing, started doing the kind of what we call in the comic book world, the grade bump flip.
Yep.
You buy, let's use Amazing Spider-Man 129 as an example.
Yep.
You buy one in 5.0. You hold it a while, you flip it, you throw some money on top of that, you buy one in 7.0. You hold it for a while, you flip it, you go try to find an 8.5. And you're constantly chasing this grade on the top of a slab.
Yeah.
And not only that, as I started collecting and getting into the Silver Age, I started realizing that I wasn't going to be able to compete. The Silver Age is when the books start getting really expensive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could, but it would cost you out of a home. I mean,
I got a small family. I got a kid.
Yeah, right,
I can't afford to
priorities
be
are
dropping
not,
5-10 grand on books.
Unless you've got a comic book store, some type of, or it's an elite business. That's all you do. And this is something that I mean, this is a secondary.
It became more about money for me. And so what started happening was I started getting disillusioned with the hobby. I noticed that my drive and my passion was just dying. I was right there close to just putting it all on ice. Okay. I was going to stop collecting. I wasn't going to sell my collection, but I was just going to stop and move on to other things, radio controlled airplanes or something.
Sure. Right.
Yep. But then I was looking for a Spider-Man 252, first black costume.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a Greek Spider-Man 252 on eBay.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, what is this? I bid on it, won it for like $4, right?
Wow,
Nothing.
Great.
Nothing. Tried to contact the seller. What do you know about it? He didn't know shit. He said he'd gotten it from a collection, whatever. Got it. Started researching. Nothing on the internet that I could find.
Of course.
Member of CGC boards has, for people that don't know, back in the day, the CGC comics, I forget what the acronym stands for, but they are basically the graders. They grade comic books, and the elite of the elite would go to the CGC forums. Mm-hmm. So not that I was elite, but I knew I played around there, and
you want it done right. You want it done legit. So
so I started asking around, and no one had any information, but they said, well, there's these two guys that are really into this. And I went, okay. So I contacted these two guys. One was by the name of Liam and one was by the name of Hector. Yep. And they were obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And their obsession got me going crazy. And they were like, oh, I want to, I'll give you this for that book, that little book that I paid $4 for. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. Him and so I had this like bidding war between these two guys. And that's what piqued my interest. And I said, what the hell? Why is this book that no one seems to care about, but these two guys do? And so those two guys are the guys. Okay, so let me explain something else. If you go to like old warhorse dealers here in America and you say, oh, this is a relatively new form of collecting, they'll probably tell you, well, I've been collecting I've got lots of foreign comic books in my collection and this and that and that. And I go, oh, really? Okay. But really what it is they're like interesting little oddities that they pick up with collections. Right. They're not actively doing what these two guys, Liam and Hector, were doing.
They're really looking, detail, filter, sorting, and they're going through it.
Laser focus.
Yeah.
Laser
There's a
focus.
Specificness to this whole.
There's a specificness to this that had never been done before. And I will hammer that home.
That's
you're going to
borderline. It's borderline obsessive addiction.
Borderline
that's
obsessive.
Okay. It is, but that's okay.
And that's the difference. Yeah. Liam and Hector were going virtually, of course.
Yeah, sure.
All over the world. And in those early days, we didn't know. One of the in this part of the hobby, one of our favorite sayings is, you can't collect what you don't know exists.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you have to educate yourself. A big part of this part of the comic book collecting hobby is education. So if you're not into education, this isn't for you. You need to move on. But so in the early days, Hector and Liam would live with Google Translate. They would go to foreign comic book forums. So a lot of Americans were so self-centered on America,
American
culture, and all this shit. We don't. Your average American doesn't think outside our borders very much. But in order to do this style of collecting, you have to be
global. You got to be global. Yep.
And so what they would do is they would go into these foreign comic book forums and this is the interesting thing. They're Americans, but Liam isn't an American; he's Canadian. But we consider Canada
Sure.
like
North
our
American.
second province or something.
Yeah, right.
But Hector was he had been in the Mexican army. He had joined the American army as a medic, and he grew up with Mexican comic books, so he knew about the existence of Mexican comic books and what was out there. Liam as well grew up in Canada. He knew that there were French Canadian books and all that, but they were also obsessed with American comics. So they were the first that got the idea and said, Spider-Man 300. I wonder how many places around the world that got done. And I wonder if I can collect them all. Right?
Yeah. Now it's a fellowship. Now
we're getting into things. And so what they would do is they would go into these forums and they would say, here's a Spider-Man 300 book. We don't know if it exists, but I'm going to give $35 through PayPal to the first person that can show me that this book exists in Greek. Right? Person says, that was done in Greece.
Great idea. That's great.
Yeah, that was done in Greece. So essentially what we are is Indiana fucking Jones of foreign edition comic books, okay?
Yeah.
So when I got with these guys, I went, holy shit, they're doing things that we haven't had to do as American collectors since the 60s. We got eBay, we got everything. All you need for an American book is money and it's yours, right? And even rare American books. But these foreigners take work. They take social skills. They take language skills.
Sure.
They take skills that you haven't had to use as an American comic book collector in decades.
And the patience.
The patience. Oh, and the patience is try getting something shipped from the other side of the planet. So
that's it. Shipped. Yeah, shipped. I can't even imagine. It probably costs more to ship it than it does to purchase it.
Sometimes it does, but you pay it. So long story short, these two guys took me under their wing.
Mm-hmm.
They started, and my love for comics came back. It flourished.
Sure.
I was so disillusioned because comics had turned into nothing about money and chasing this damn number on top of a slab, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, Liam, Hector, a guy by the name of Tim, Ken Worthing, Tony Pomilla, Scott McManus, Ryan Rickard, our buddy Bjorn in Sweden. There was this hardcore cabal of guys at the CGC boards that got together, and they're road less travel type of guys. That's another thing about this part of the hobby. Yeah. We, if you're someone that doesn't like to follow, I'm not a follower, never been.
No, I've never been that way. I'm more of if you want to call me a leader, that's fine, but I think it's,
or just you're interested in unique and different stuff.
I follow my own.
Exactly. You don't want to take that trail that's well worn. You want to go out through the bush, right?
It's completely boring. Yeah.
Yeah, it's boring. So let's get interesting, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing more interesting than taking these key American comic books or classic cover or whatever books and searching again. It's Indiana Jones, baby. Who didn't want to be Indiana Jones virtually?
You're making your own market. If you decide that you end up building this and you've got a full collection of a worldwide version of one comic, come on. I mean, this is gold. And it's something that nobody else has. That's what I mean. This is it's not just about being obsessed with conquering it all. You're doing this as a collective because it's inspiring, and it's how cool is that to where you could open up the book and it might be different on the inside too. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one on.
Sometimes covers don't match guts. There's all kinds of weird shit that can happen.
That's so niche, but it's so kitsch too. It's so cool. I love it.
It's cool.
I love it.
And the friends that you make. See, and this is the other thing. It's not even
the relationships.
Don't even think of it as conquering. I see it as global citizen making. I am a global citizen. Okay, collecting these books. I got a friend in Greece. Guess what? During the austerity riots, remember when the EU was punishing Greece?
Oh yeah,
they were trying to claw back their
survive.
They owed money to the EU. I don't remember exactly what happened, but during the austerity riots, you had pensioners, retirees, old Greeks going into riots into the park, tying themselves to trees and blowing their brains out. There was massive civil unrest in Greece. Guess what? I care about my friends in Greece. My friend that helped me get this, I care about him.
Sure.
I worry for him. I have now become a global citizen. How many Americans really gave a shit? Well, I give a shit. I've got friends all over the world. If a typhoon goes through the Philippines, I
Then
worry about my friends
absolutely.
there. If
And
those massive flooding in Europe, in Germany, I worry about my buddies Peter and Alexander there. So it's so
listen,
amazing.
You're preaching.
It's just
You're preaching
a
to the choir,
plus.
because that's the way I am. Compassion and empathy are number one. They always have been, and that's the way I roll. And that's why anybody who knows me knows that. And I think that's one of the reasons I know you're passionate about
Oh,
things. I don't mean it,
I'm
but
freaking crazy.
having said that, you've made this is a really interesting thing, because I didn't think the interview would go into this section, but
Hmm,
being a global citizen is also having global responsibility. And
exactly.
it's not the power of the American dollar, whatever that means.
Hmm.
You're not offering a third world country, a dollar for something that's worth 1,000 here. You're not doing that. You might do that because a dollar might be a lot. You know what I'm
It's a
saying?
lot
You're
that,
not doing it with the
yeah.
intent. You're not doing it with the intent to disrupt or to injure or anything like that
No.
another person. You're doing
Now,
this to build not just a collection, but you're also building a collective, if you want to call it that, of people that
yes.
you become endearing if they deserve that, if they warrant it. Some people you
Yeah.
probably don't want to deal with, but
Yeah.
that's a remarkable thing. What a win-win on a
Yeah.
lot of scales.
It's a win-win. And you know, for me as an American, I'm a second generation Mexican. I come from a family from Mexico.
Hmm.
I was born here, but I have that. My mom is Hispanic, so for me as well, I was kind of primed to, it was kind of a reaching out to figure out my cultural heritage.
Yes,
Calimán, huge Mexican
huge.
superhero.
Yeah.
So it kind of scratches all these itches that in traditional comic book collecting don't get scratched, or have never been scratched, or haven't been scratched since the
Hmm.
60s, when there wasn't an internet and you had to actually make
Sure.
lists and mail stuff to
All corners of the globe.
com-
Yeah.
comic
Yeah.
book dealers to try to
Yeah.
find stuff.
Yeah.
So it kind of just reignited this passion. And like you said, we started building a market. It was behind the scenes back then.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening, because I have kind of a journalistic background. I worked for the
Yes.
Roswell Daily Record.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of guys back then. So I wrote the very first article. It was a comic book collecting with a foreign variant focus.
Okay.
We were wrong in using the word variant. Now we use edition. It's a different
I think
classification. More
edition's the right
accurate.
proper. Yeah, it's a
It's a more
proper way to do it.
accurate. It's a
Yeah.
more accurate classification. Variant is a very buzzy word. It's a buzzword. And as we know, variants have to be printed, around the same time at the same
Yeah.
facility. Blah blah
Yep.
blah blah. So we took on the book collecting hobby classification system, which is editions, and then printings. Could be the Mexican edition first print, or essentially Mexican edition, La Prensa, published by La Prensa, and then you
Yeah.
have OPSA. You got different publishers, and unlike in traditional comic book collecting, where anything printed after the first print is considered a reprint and very often considered worthless.
Yeah.
We don't use the word reprint in this side of the hobby. And the reason is the simple act of translation alters what it is. Okay. And we'll get to, with the Greek Spider-Man dildo issue, we'll get there. But,
Now you got everybody's going to watch the end of the video now.
You
So
got to watch
thank
to
you.
the end.
And by the
We are
way,
gonna-
everybody like and share this. I know you guys are going to enjoy this, so please like and share while you guys are watching this.
So
Go
we
ahead.
created I wrote the first article.
I'm going to bring this up full screen, so you go ahead and talk. I'm going to go ahead and do your magic.
So me and a couple guys there at the CGC boards, Tim Bildhauser, Ken Worthing, Liam Sturgis, Scott McManus, Ron Rickard, Brian Rickard. There's a guy, our buddy Trent, who runs Spawn World. There were a lot of these early guys. And a lot of them, we had this big debate. Why are you going to shine a spotlight onto this? Why? Let's just keep in the dark getting this stuff. And why are we? And the reason is because I have a journalistic sensibility. I used to sell photographs to AP, the AP State Wire, back when I lived in Roswell, when I worked for the Roswell Daily Record. So I was bitten by that journalistic bug. Sure. And one of the things I realized was no one was writing about these books. No one. Now, there was some comic book journalism related to like generalizations, like Nimbo Kid, the Italian Superman and this and that.
Okay.
But they were odd and here and there. They weren't just dedicated to it. So we made a magazine that was dedicated to it, and it is Foreign Comic Collector Magazine.
Awesome.
And we designed it, we published it, we had friends write for it. You know, South Africa's own George is the expert on South African books. You know, we did the work to make this magazine and to kind of start sharing this part of the hobby, because how many other collectors out there were like me, disillusioned, tired, you know, it's all about money, flipping, chasing a number on top of a slab, and just purely bored. How many times have you seen a Spider-Man 129? At every show you see 300 of them.
And you know, the variation in all of it. That's the, you know, I'm from Detroit, and everything's old cars. Everything, it's all cars. The Rust Belt, it's all about cars. I'm a big proponent of old motorcycles. I like the ones that have the quirkiness that somebody owned, that some, you know, and it's so similar in collecting like old books. I have a huge library of antiquated books, and I've been blessed with that. But it's always the stories behind it. It's the and I talk about this in other videos on my show. It's about the pressing. It's about how they did this, how they molded all the metal to get every letter, and they subtitle everything.
Yep.
It's the same thing when it comes to this, what you're talking about, because of one of the things I want to bring up is a lot of, and I'm a big proponent. And if anybody doesn't like it, just don't even worry about watching me. I'm a second generation immigrant as well. My father, my grandfather, my grandmother, they're from Wales. They're from the UK.
Nice.
And they came over here, and that, you know, I went as a kid, I went over to Wales where my dad grew up, and we spent months there. And it's important that people understand that we're functioning people in society. It's not, we're all immigrants unless we're Native American.
Unless you're Native American, you're an immigrant, period. Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
So, and I'm thankful that I've got Native American blood in me as well. So I'm very fortunate in that respect. So I'm a mutt, and I'm proud of it, and I'm well educated and whatever. The power that you've got in this comic book genre, though, is that some of them actually teach, if they're written in English, they can teach foreign nations English very easily. And, and that's something that they did in a lot of these comics.
Yep.
Not the ones that you're necessarily doing, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, there
are some. There's some where they teach English in it. So
Absolutely.
Some of the Thailand editions
Absolutely
will have it in original Thai, and then on the bottom they'll have the English translation.
Exactly.
So you're exactly right.
And it's powerful. It's such a powerful thing to link us together and that's instead of tearing us apart. I know it's silly. If you think about comic books could save the world. Yeah, I get it. But just thinking that little way, shifting that little bit of caring about the person that you're buying the comic book from is not a bad thing. That is not it's a superpower as far as I'm concerned. If you
it's made me a global citizen. I'm a better person because of it.
Because
of this, I'm a better person. I have friends all over the world that teach me things.
Yeah.
Right? You know, former Yugoslavian. Well, guess what?
That's crazy. I'm going to bring that up full screen. That's so crazy to me.
So
tell me about how they produce these things in these countries. How do they do this? I mean,
so they get the license, but this is the EKS. So this series ran for decades. It was a long running series, but then again the Serbian-Croat War. I mean, there's a lot of publishing that stopped. But the story of this. Okay, there's a guy, my buddy in Serbia, Rajko. Okay, now we remember the Bosnian Serb War as. Some people
might not have. Some people might not even know about the war at all.
Okay, so there was a civil war in Yugoslavia. And the reason Americans cared about it is because NATO started dropping bombs on the Serbs. Slobodan Milosevic. I don't know how to say his name, but anyway, he was considered a really horrible guy. Now, in the Western media, that's all I digested.
Sure.
But my buddy Rajko from Serbia, him and I had this long email conversation about the war, and about misconceptions that I had just going off my media. I mean, the big one was, he told me, everyone hated Slobodan. They hated the guy. But when NATO bombs are dropping on your houses, you tend to close ranks, right? So
that's an understatement. Yeah.
It's like, so there's stories to this. Another one I like to tell people. Now, Sarajevo. We've all heard, people that like history know that Sarajevo was one of the most recent, I believe it was under siege by the Serbian army for something like 8 months, maybe even a year and a half. I forget how long it was, but it was long. Not since World War II was a European big city under siege like that. And it happened during the Yugoslavian War, during the breakup of the Balkans. And, think about this. This book might have been in the hands of a young Serbian kid whose dad died from a NATO bomb. Or it might have been in Sarajevo where they didn't have electricity for months and they had to start burning shit for fuel. How many EKSs got burned just so that they wouldn't freeze at night? Now, can you say that about an American Spider-Man 129? You can't. That's, and sometimes we like to call these books conflict books. You've heard of the term conflict diamonds, right?
Yes.
Conflict books are books that had to survive stressful, crazy, whether it be civil strife, war, you name it. So there are other instances of conflict books. I tend to consider EKS, former Yugoslavian books, as conflict books because these books had to survive that, and so it changes. This book now becomes more of a cultural icon. And through the hunting of this book, I became friends with a Serbian guy named Rajko, who informed me and gave me a different side of that war and how they saw NATO and the West and all that. Another interesting story, I met a guy at IndieCon where we had a booth, a foreign comic collector booth. I think I showed you pictures of that.
Yeah, you did. Absolutely.
Show a picture of our booth with Tim where he's standing.
Yeah, let me see if I got,
See if you can find that.
I didn't download that one. I've got this one and I've got...
those aren't the booth. It was a booth one.
Oh, I had that one though.
But anyway, we had it's okay. And so these twin brothers came up and they're like, "Oh my God, that's awesome!" And I was telling them, "Oh yeah, it's former Yugoslavia. I got it from."
But he's a real tall guy, by the way. He's a very tall guy. That one, right?
Yeah, that's Tim.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so these brothers were they were Serbs. They were second generation Serbs. And so we started talking about the war and all that stuff. And they were saying that back in the 90s, when they were younger, they were ashamed somewhat of being Serbian, right? Because of the media and all the stuff that was going on.
Sure.
But when they found out that there was a 129, which was one of their favorite key books in Serbia, they're like, "Oh my God, that is so awesome!" Like it immediately connected them to their heritage, right? And I talked to him and I said, "Hey, dude, that's awesome. Be proud of being Serbian. Of course, no one is going to blame you for the sins of the government of where you came or whatnot. So me and Tim, we said, you know what, Brian, it was twins. Brian was one of them, and then I forget his other brother's name. We said, me and Tim are going to find you this book. So I went to my buddy Rachko. I told him the story. I said, "Hey, we were at this comic book con and we ran into these brothers that their dad, immigrated from Serbia and all of that. And they were just obsessed with it. And so my buddy Rachko helped find me and Tim, one of these books, and me and Tim paid for it. We had it shipped. We shipped it to them, and boom, bada boom. We connected these two Serbs to their heritage. And that is what makes this part of the hobby special, guys. This isn't the everyday stuff that you're going to see at every con in America. There's stories and there's things you can do within this world that are awesome.
That's you've built something too that it brings what you've done with journalism in the past, your creativity of or just your not obsession. I don't like the word obsession.
No, I'm obsessed.
Okay. Well, I mean, but you're obsessed with people and story. You're not obsessed with numbers and we all need finance a certain amount. I understand that. We all need to have money to do things as a tool, but the rest of it's all secondary. This is different. This is this is a very healthy way to bridge the gap. And that's something that's not, And in today's world is not an easy thing to do.
No. And when you find these, and that's the thing, as human beings, we're going out, we're doing stuff, right? We're always looking for genuineness. At least for me, I'm always looking for that genuine thing. Being able, when I found this part of the hobby, I immediately, my brain said, wait a second, this is special.
Yeah.
Why are the, when I ran into those two guys, Liam and Hector, I said,
Yeah.
wait a second, there's something here. There's
Yep.
something here special. Maybe it's the journalistic part. Maybe, but whatever
and
it
you're
was,
not doing it.
I recognized it.
You're not doing it to be, oftentimes I see this and I don't like this. I don't like this about collecting. They're doing it to consume, to grab it so that somebody else doesn't have it. You're not
Yeah.
doing that. I mean, there's certain things we want to keep
Yeah.
for, I get that. Leave them to the kids, whatever, when we move on, that kind of stuff. But you're not doing it that way. You're doing it to build. And I'm sure there's a certain few of them that you really want to keep for yourself. And that's fine too. But
I try to keep them all.
yeah. And that's just that, right? Right. But you're doing it in a way that's it's not destructive. It's constructive because you're building.
No.
You're building.
Yeah, and this is the neat thing, because Americans are so, in many, I hate to use the word jingoist, but we are. We consider ourselves, and we dominate the pop culture sphere of the world in many ways.
Sure.
What was really neat was, and so I started doing what Hector and Liam did. I started going to forums. I started asking for help. I started doing all this stuff. And what I found out was that for a lot of these foreign collectors, they were like amazed. They're like, holy shit, you give a shit about our editions? Oh, heck yeah, I do, bro. I want to know everything about them. I want them.
Right.
And it I think for them, it made them go, oh, well, wait a second. Maybe there is real value here. Now, that brings me to another thing. When I wrote the first article, I came up with a term. I call it the foreign indigenous bias.
Okay.
And what that is when, let's say, someone in Portugal, on the stands at the time, you could buy an American spawn one, or you could buy a Portuguese Abril. Okay. The foreign indigenous bias is when an indigenous collector, puts the American pop culture collectible up here.
Yeah.
And they put their local indigenous down here. Yeah. They think of it as lesser than. Now, you don't find it everywhere. There are instances where you have hardcore local indigenous markets where they hoard their stuff. But we found it often enough that I was able to give a term to it. And it creates a perfect storm, right? I'll give you, so using that Portuguese spawn as an example, I build the spawn one set. I hunt it all over the world. It's complete. But the damn Portuguese one was hard. There's one for Brazil, one for Portuguese. And my buddy Nuno in Portugal, he's from Portugal. He said, dude, that's a hard book. I was like, why? It's Copper Age, right? It's from the 80s. Shouldn't be hard. Spawn was huge. It should be easy.
Sure.
He goes, no, dude, you don't understand. When this was on the stands, everyone wanted the American book. They didn't want the Portuguese book. Or if they had the Portuguese book, do you think if they had a bag and board, which one do you think got bagged and boarded?
Yeah.
The American did.
Interesting.
The Portuguese didn't. It got thrown into a closet somewhere, right? So it creates this perfect storm of rarity, difficulty, condition, because they weren't kept as nice.
Sure.
The Philippines are really bad about the foreign indigenous bias towards the Filipino books. But so we were running into that problem all over the place. Now you said do no harm. Now, we try to do no harm, but American money harms. It does. We have to get into that. So there's another aspect to this, okay? There's something about the back issue market in the foreign world that's different than the American one. Now, there is no Overstreet. Okay, Overstreet, bye-bye. So for fans watching this who don't know, Overstreet is a comic book price guide. It tells dealers and collectors, gives them kind of a basic baseline of value
to work off of.
That doesn't exist in our world. And in fact, the back issue market's even more complex than the American because you got to keep track of 3 separate markets, Ted.
How's that?
You've got the local indigenous.
Yeah.
You've got the Portuguese collector selling to the Portuguese collector. That's one market. That's a local indigenous market.
Yeah.
Then you've got the broader worldwide market. That would be anyone from around the world selling to anyone, right? Okay. So take Bjorn, our favorite spider crazy in Sweden, selling selling a Portuguese Spawn 1 to a Brazilian collector. That's the broader international market. Then you have the local American within North America market. That's its own separate animal, because that's where a lot of the big money is, right?
Sure.
So you've got 3 separate markets you've got to keep track of. Now, one of the things that's happening is so our group and foreign collectors, since we've been doing everything from the magazines and all of that, of course, other collectors have gone into it. It's grown. There's a lot, there's a huge community now. So what has happened is American dollars go into a local indigenous market and then cause chaos
because they inflate the inflation, or what?
Because we collect differently than they do. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
In Italy, they're more run-based collectors. In Italy, for the longest time, the ultimate achievement is to have, the Italian Corno Spider-Man run from 1 all the way to the end, right? That used to be how Americans collected in the 60s to 70s and even parts of the 80s. But here in America, as we've become key obsessed, so a key is, for the viewers that don't do comics, is when, like, first Punisher, Spider-Man 129. It's a huge deal. It's a key. We have become key obsessed. So I'll give you an example. The Italian 300, the very first Venom, huge book. In Italy, the Italian 300 would be around the same price as the book in front of and behind it. Yeah. So when American money goes onto Italian eBay and we started snapping up these books, the Italian dealers started to realize what was happening, and they started bringing their prices up, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Law of supply and demand. I had one of my Italian contacts, his name's Claudio. He's a wonderful guy. He actually hit me up. He was like, Matt, I need you to do me a favor. And I was like, what's up? What's going on? He's like, I need you to go into this Italian forum and set some things straight. And I was like, okay, well, what's the problem? He's like, there's a huge battle and drama going on. A bunch of Italian collectors are revolting because they think that these Italian dealers are trying to rip them off. He's like, they're like with pitchforks and torches over here.
Yeah.
You need to go in there and explain why this is happening. And so he wanted me to go in there and say, guys, the Italian dealers aren't ripping you off. It's just that Americans have
this is a market value now.
Yeah. It's satiable appetite for this book, because it's one of the best Italian 300s. I mean, look at the Italian 300. They're all black cover. Yeah. Stunning, right?
Sure.
So it caused chaos, because these poor Italian collectors were like, they're trying to build runs, they're trying to upgrade copies or whatever, and then they get to the Italian 300 and they're like, normally the book used to be between 15 and 30 euros. Now it's good copies are going for 120, 130, 200 euros.
How do you make sure that you don't get screwed over? So so I get on
you can't.
Website. Okay.
You can't. You have to grab your balls. That's another that's another thing about
that's it, because you're balls to the wall, literally, because you're not.
As Americans, we're protected by PayPal and eBay. We have all these protections.
Yeah,
we can neg you, and we can send it back and ask for a refund and all this shit. Not in this world, bro. In this world, you got to use Western Union and be afraid of getting ripped off. And I've had books that came from India that took half a year to get to me, dude.
Wow.
On Indian eBay, there's this thing called Paisa Pay, or no, I might be thinking of something else. But anyway, so on Indian eBay, they had this thing set up where you didn't release the funds till you got the item, right?
Right.
And so I ordered this Indian Spider-Man 1 out of India, and it probably like was on a donkey going to like some place that
whatever, man.
It took 6 months to get to me. The guy hits me up back up. I didn't know about this, and he's like, "Hey, dude, I need I haven't got paid." And I was like, I paid you like 4 months ago, 5 months ago.
But it's the way it works.
He was like, it's the way it works. You have to go in and respond and say that you received the item. I said, but I haven't received the item. And he's like, no. It's in the mail. It's gonna get there.
It's not there though. Did you give you a
transaction
not there. Number or anything? Come on.
No, I had to grab my hairy
that's
little
all
balls.
you can do. I mean, that's it.
And say, okay, let's do it. And do people sometimes get burned? Yes.
Sure.
And then you got to deal with foreign post office services that can be crazy,
customs, everything.
freaky.
Go on and
Customs
on,
customs has
alone.
taken razor blades and
Yeah.
sliced.
Sure.
We've had rare books from Mexico in the group, in the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
We once had a rare Hawkman. I think there was only like 2 copies known. The American Customs took a freaking box cutter and they sliced through the top of the package. Underneath that rare Hawkman was a Los Hombres X1. We're talking the Mexican X-Men 1. We're talking a book that is worth, in the G's, plural, right?
Yeah.
This customs guy just took that box cutter and sliced right through it. That Hawkman that there was only like 2
Gone.
known.
Toast.
Cover. Cut in half. By some miracle, the Los Hombres X underneath survived. And that brings me to the next part of it, the American market. The American market is its own animal because you can charge an American premium.
Sure.
Why? Because you don't have to worry about foreigners shipping horribly. You don't have to worry about the book surviving customs.
It's stateside.
It's stateside.
Yeah.
So you're paying a premium for not having to do the work.
The luxury. Right? Yep.
Exactly. So Ted, this shit's so complicated, man.
What is
I go all over the place.
What's the biggest drawback? I mean, this is interesting to me because I can go and I'm going to search for things and you're going to help me. But what's the biggest drawback? Is it just the not the politics of it all, but is it just the damage control? It's the
biggest drawback. The biggest drawback might be really essentially, I think, the patience part of it. As Americans, as anyone actually, since the World Wide Web,
we want
it right now.
Yeah.
It's immediate. We want instant gratification.
Yep.
That's not going to happen for a book from the Philippines. That's not going to happen from a book being shipped from Taiwan. That's not going to happen in some of these South American countries where the postal services are like molasses. Okay.
Yeah.
The biggest drawback, I think, is that you spend a lot of money up front, and that initial hit, that reward that you get takes time. It's delayed. But when you get it and you get a super rare book and you get that former Yugoslavian 129 or that Greek 129, it hits the serotonin levels, and that brings me to this other point. We call this a sickness, Ted.
Yeah, well,
in the hobby.
I've been down with the sickness for a while. So I mean, that's it, man. It's not, I don't consider it a sickness. I consider it a blessing because there's a lot of things that we could be blowing our money on. But there's a lot of things that are completely detrimental to us besides this. My only thing is that when you do this, it's not necessarily for capital gain. It's not for financial gain. This is for you personally, usually. Now there are some people getting into. Are you in a resale market? Do you turn these?
Well, I help people in that market.
Okay, that's a big part of this. That's a big part of you.
There is a resale market because so many people around the world, as well as Americans, have realized, hey, people give a shit about these books outside of just the American original. Yeah. And so as more money comes in and more demand comes in, it alters the local indigenous markets. It alters the grander international market. And what you end up having is this kind of Wild West, right? Because there isn't an Overstreet guide. So on our group at Foreign Comic Collector Magazine, we always tell a group on Facebook, we always tell the newbies, if you're afraid that you might be overpaying or underpaying, hit us up. We'll tell you if the price is reasonable or basically what's out there. Because there is no Overstreet. So it's all in the old guy's noodles. Now there are people working on providing a web-based kind of tracker to sales to kind of keep a finger on the pulse of the market, but it's not there yet. And so you can get burned. Have I overpaid for books? Yes.
Sure.
Have I underpaid for books? Yes.
Of course.
Would I change it? Would I go back and not pay for it? No, because that's the other part of it. When you're dealing with buying opportunities, I mean, right now this second Greek, I know of 3 collectors right now pulling their hair out trying to find it.
Well, I can imagine.
Is it a value or is it what you're willing to pay for it? And that's the other thing that makes this part of the hobby different. Time is money, right, Ted?
Absolutely.
And if you have spent 2 years looking for Spider-Man, so this is Greek. we try to say Enetet Man. It's actually in Cyrillic, the Cyrillic Greek lettering, and Spider-Man. So if you have been looking for this book for 2 years, and the last sale was, let's say this book sold for $300 last sale, and you haven't found it, and you found a Greek seller that wants $500 for it, and you're like, I'm going to overpay for that. But how much time
have you wasted?
Worth?
Is it worth $1 a day if you spend over a year looking for it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's all relative. It's all relative.
Yeah, it's all relative, but still,
if you're not going to eat for a week because you're buying that, then maybe you shouldn't do it.
Maybe you shouldn't do it.
If you're spending $500 a week anyway on food, that you probably shouldn't be eating that much either. But
yeah, you'd be a 600-pound life. But like, a collector would come to me and go, "Is that more than what the last issue went for?" I'd say, "Yeah." How long have you been looking for it? I've been looking for it for 2 years.
Well,
how much is $200 worth to you? Is $200 worth 2 years of effort and energy trying to find it?
Yeah, right. You're not going to get the 2 years back.
Then pay the $500, motherfucker, right? It's like, so it's like the Wild West. You gotta. Again, we're getting back to Indiana Jones shit. It's just,
that's it. It's obtaining the Holy Grail, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. For you, and if it's one of the last ones you need to finish the set, then the $200, you're not going to sweat it. You're not going to think it. You're just going to buy it.
Before I bring up the 4 pictures that you sent me.
Oh, yes.
What is the most valuable, rare piece that you know of in this
foreign edition
genre?
comics?
Yeah.
Well, there's a few. There's some really rare Disney stuff in the Nordic countries, but probably the most valuable, I would think, would probably be some of the Batman Piff Paffs out of Argentina. There's some early Batman stuff that South America did that is really hard to find and extremely valuable, not only in their countries of origin, but for Americans or for anyone around the world that knows of it. Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, Brazil did a ton of Golden Age stuff. Batman, Human Torch, early Marvel stuff, early DC stuff. I can't spout the actual issues off the top of my head, but I can tell you that they can go for G's in the multiple. And the other thing about this is, when you're ascribing value to these books, you have to remember that there's a lot of people that aren't even aware they exist. So full 100% awareness hasn't happened yet. So you have to also look at these books as value related 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future, as more of this awareness comes out. I think I paid, this Mexican, this is the Mexican Spider-Man 129. Yeah. I think I paid maybe $80 for this. At the time, I thought it was a little high. You could actually get these for $40-50 out of Mexico. Okay. Now this book is probably, I wouldn't even dream of letting this book go for less than a G. Yeah. Less than $1,000.
But that's the power of it. I mean, that's just it.
And that's the power of it. As more awareness has come out, we found out that they're harder to find. We found out that a lot of Mexican collectors aren't letting them go because they want to keep them in their collections. Sure. I mean, all sorts of stuff like that. So I would say that the most valuable foreign edition is definitely worth upward, maybe 20, 30 grand. I know that there was a collector recently thinking about paying 40 grand for the non-canon Spider-Man wedding issue. It's an issue where Peter Parker was going to marry Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy died in Spider-Man 122. Yeah. Her neck broke. Okay. Yep. And
how's he going to marry her? Yeah. Well,
how's he going to marry her? Well, in Mexico, they had a non-canon run that they continued on where not only did Gwen Stacy live, but she became Peter Parker's girlfriend. And there's panels where she's looking lovingly in his eyes and stuff. Wow. And, in American comic book history, the death of Gwen Stacy is, for some people,
tragic.
It's tragic. It's one of the biggest things that happened in the Marvel universe.
Key issue.
And it's a super key issue. And she didn't die. And then in the wedding issue, you have on the cover this picture of Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy leaning in to kiss each other at their wedding. Like, that there was a hardcore Spider-Man collector. The highest graded that we know of was at the Baltimore Comic Con. And my buddy who owns the issue, he's like, I ain't letting this issue go. It's mainly here for show and tell. But when someone asked him what his don't want to sell price was, he was like, I don't know, maybe I'd think about it at 40G. This collector was like, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to get back to you. He thought long and hard about it, and my buddy didn't want to sell it. My buddy John, he's one of my co-hosts on Global Comic Safari, a YouTube show I run.
Yep.
And but he told me, he was like, this collector, this hardcore Spidey guy, he thought long and hard about it. So, you know, these books are coming into their own, and I do believe you're going to see records getting broken every day as more and more awareness comes. But this is the good thing. If you're a comic book collector and you're this is the first time you're hearing about this, and you're like, wow, this is interesting. I want to get into this. You're still way ahead of the curve than most. I'd say the majority of people still, at least here in America, still aren't even quite aware of this stuff. So if you get in now, you're still way ahead of the curve.
Right. Give me 1 second, because I did. I have to go back a little bit on Rising Tide Broadcast Network. I didn't. I talked about our affiliate. I forgot about that. So bear with me for a second. As you guys are listening to this awesome interview with Matt, I want you guys to understand how important it is that you guys check out everything we're doing on Rising Tide Broadcast Network. We're a group of creatives that help creatives build their business. Check out everything we're doing on Facebook as well as on YouTube. All these YouTube channels, for that matter. We've got a lot going on this this network, and it's just, I'm glad that you're part of this, man, because it's so fascinating. With the 4 pictures that you did send, which one did you want to start with? The Fantastic Four?
Yeah, let's start with the Fantastic Four.
Okay, so tell people about what this is all about. These are the backstories. These are the
these are books I wanted to go a little more in depth into.
Mm-hmm.
This is a Fantastic Four 1 out of South Africa. This is published by Republican Press.
Wow.
Now, this was printed in the 80s, but it is still an amazing edition for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest is they altered the art so weirdly in this book in comparison to the American original, and also a lot of the other foreign Fantastic Four 1s are altered somewhat, but not as much as this one. Now, go to the next. You see that thing, free poster? Go to the next picture, the Thor.
Okay.
This poster is inside there. This poster was actually done by a Spanish artist. It wasn't even done by an American artist. I forget his name, but he was popular in Spain. And so it's interesting. So go back to the cover.
Yep.
Okay. So this book was printed in the 80s in South Africa. Now, as we know, early on, I talked about how these books are cultural artifacts and how they transcend even just being a comic book at all. Right. And a lot of that has to deal with the environments that they were printed in, the pop culture that was kind of reflected through their culture and then reflected back at us. There's all kinds of reasons. But comic books, I think, can actually be on the right side of history or on the wrong side of history. And that's kind of what I'm going to get into on this.
Yeah.
This book was on the right side of history. Now, people that like history know that in the 80s in South Africa, what was the big thing going on there? Apartheid was ugly. It is. I mean, I consider it a stain on human history. Okay,
yeah. Horrific. Yep.
Apartheid was going on, full on heavy. South Africa, separate but equal, 2 systems, bullshit.
Yep.
Right now, the censors of South Africa knew that the world was looking at them as if they were under a microscope.
Sure.
Okay, so the censors in South Africa, they tried to, at least with the higher form entertainment. So, there'd be news channels that would be watched by the white population, and there'd be channels that would be watched by the black population. Like, what if they had like a Time magazine or something? It would be, the white population would subscribe to one type, the black would subscribe to another. It was this whole like fantasy that they were trying to show that they were able to have the 2 separate races not mixing and living in harmony and all this crap that we know is bullshit. But the censors would censor media to try to make that so. The censors would also try to keep media from leaving the country. So if you're in an airport and you were flying out of South Africa and you had, like, say, a South African magazine or a newspaper, the customs agents would seize it.
Confiscate.
They wouldn't let it go. But in the lower forms of entertainment, now, this is the misconception. People think that they censored everything. Well, that would be impossible, right? Well, and not only that, they didn't care about a lot of stuff. So there was a lot of culture in South Africa in their media that showed the racist mixing and showed mixed race people and did all that stuff. There were like local newspapers and local movies. So there was that, right? It was mainly the higher form of media that was sort of censored. The censors relied on the people on all the media below to sort of self-censor, so they could choose, depending on their audience, how they wanted to censor themselves, if they wanted to show the racist mixing or not. Republican press is on the right side of history because they chose to show them. So that Thor poster that's in there, the posters, Republican press would have these competitions. And little kids there in South Africa would shoot Polaroids of themselves, and they would mail them into the publisher. And the publisher would do these drawings so that you could win bikes, Walkmans, all these different kinds of awards. And on these posters, on the backs of the posters, they would show the winners.
That's
right?
cool. Yeah.
And on these posters, you have, little black kids, little white kids, little mixed kids, Asian kids, whatever. Didn't matter. There was no censorship. They chose not to censor how
reality.
That's reality.
It's real. Yeah.
So for me, Republican press is on the right side of history because they chose to ignore the apartheid kind of realities at the time. Now, one of the reasons they probably got away with it was because comic books were considered throwaway entertainment. Right. Just like anywhere else, you bought it off the stand. It's just rags. It's just a newspaper. Maybe if it was more of a slick thing, maybe the censors might have said something. Who knows? And in a different, I've talked to different people from South Africa. They've said in different parts of the country, censorship was heavier or not as bad or whatever. Yeah. So of course, like anything else, this isn't a black and white thing. It's degrees of gradation in there. Yep. But that doesn't change the fact that when you own a South African edition of a Marvel book, you can say you are owning a comic book that is on the right side of history. Yeah. And that changes it. This no longer is just a comic book. This is a cultural artifact that shows the horrors of apartheid and shows a publisher that chose to make the right call instead of the wrong call. And this is a tough book. We hesitate to use the word rare in this world. But buying opportunities for this book are few and far between. The last one that I know of sold 3 years ago for something like close to 2 G's or a G and a half, something like that. It had the poster. In North America, there are only 2 copies of this book. This one and another. The other one does not have the poster. If it does not have the poster, it is incomplete. Mine has the poster, and it's beautiful. And how do you put a price? How do you put a price on this?
You don't. Well, here, this is history. And this is if you were to have an opportunity to put these in trades, in a trade book, in a multiple stash of the greatness of storytelling, literally, historical storytelling.
This
would
book
be one that I would do.
In there. This book deserves.
That would be. It's what we call a key issue. I know
it's a key issue. It's got the story behind it. It's got the interesting changes they did. It's got a Spanish artist Thor poster. I mean,
so who did the cover? Does Kirby?
No. Yeah, I think it was Kirby.
Isn't that something? All right. Interesting.
Yeah. So this is an example of a book on the right side of history. Now let's go to the Iron Man.
Yeah. Go up there. Okay.
This is the Chilean Iron Man. This is a book I would say is on the wrong side of history. Now let's go a little bit into this. We know that Salvador Allende was the democratically elected president of Chile way back when, before Pinochet. I don't know the exact date right off the top of my head, but he was elected. The CIA was down there fooling around and stuff, and the CIA did not like him because he was a leftist. And as you know, or anyone that studies history knows, we were doing all sorts of nasty and gross things that the CIA was doing down there in the war against communism. So if you even had a little bit of a leftist leaning bent, you were an enemy, right? And the CIA did everything they could to depose Allende. They tried to do it legally first. When they couldn't do that, they propped up a dictator of Pinochet. And this dictatorship was brutal. It was horrible. And as Americans, we should all be not only horrified, but, we should be screaming at the tops of our lungs at some of the injustices that our CIA did down there in our name. But Pinochet was a really nasty man. So This publisher is Gabriel Mistral. Okay, but before it was Gabriel Mistral, it was something called Quimantu. There was something Quimantu, but the publisher before that was kind of a leftist leaning publisher. They chose to distribute books and things that they published directly to the populace. They didn't go through middlemen, right? So it wasn't about profit. It was about, so they would publish things on art and culture and leftist writers and whatnot. And these books had blue and black covers. They were very simple, So Quimantu didn't because they weren't necessarily doing it for maximum profit. They had to kind of make them kind of simple. When Pinochet came into power, he changed the publisher. So all the people that had been there, they were gone, they were removed. The publisher turned it to Gabriel Mistral. But if you were caught with one of these blue books, you could be taken away. The Pinochet government had something called free helicopter rides. And in a free helicopter ride, a dissident or someone they didn't like would be taken up to like 3,000 feet. They'd be tied up and they'd be kicked out of the door of a Huey helicopter. So that's the wrong side of history, right? So Pinochet created Gabriel Mistral to bring over neoliberalist what he considered propaganda and capitalist and all that stuff. So they decided they were going to bring over American superheroes. And so they licensed Iron Man, Spider-Man, Conan, and the Hulk, I believe. And, this publisher turned into Gabriel Mistral was really just a propaganda arm of the Pinochet dictatorship. This is an example. Now, do I not love the book? No, I love the book. I want one. I need it for my Iron Man set. It's an awesome book. But this is an example of a book on the wrong side of history. This book has now evolved. It's no longer just a comic book. It is a cultural artifact of the dictatorship that we propped up in Chile. And
it's powerful. That's powerful.
And think about this. We think of book burning happening in Nazi Germany, right? Mm-hmm. You know what they were doing in Chile? They were creating bonfires of these leftist blue and black covered books. They were burning books as recently as when the coup happened. God dang it, I can't think of the date when the coup happened. It was in the 80s. I forget. It was in the 80s, I believe. But yeah, they were burning books as recently as then. Bad stuff.
The only, and the thing about history, it's recorded by the victors. And so you've got to, when you look at things, reality is, your reality is that I wouldn't have known anything of that sort without you saying something about it. So, and that's something that a lot of people, they need to realize that propaganda comes in all forms. So, it could be it could be anything from the Holy Bible to a comic book.
Exactly. And going back to Greece, you're a Greek little kid in Greece, and the military junta took your grandpa away, and you see a Captain America comic book on the stands. Yeah, you're going to see that as pure capitalist propaganda.
And they build hatred amongst people that it doesn't have to be. This doesn't have to be done that way.
It doesn't have to be done that way, but it did, and it affected sales of the book, and it was connected with the history of the book. So so this is a good example. Now let's go to the Greek book and talk about something else, because it's the fun one. This is the fun one we all wanted to get to, the Spider-Man dildo issue. Sex sells. So this is what got him watching our show. So back, I'm gonna retouch on what we were talking about earlier. About how the licensing departments in Marvel and DC didn't give a shit, and all they cared about was that the checks cash.
Sure,
that's it. So this is a fun example. So this was published by Mammoth in Greece, and we know a guy named Vasilis. So Vasilis is this very interesting guy who was a young youth in Greece. He was growing up in the late 70s. But unlike most youths in Greece, I wouldn't have known this without knowing my Greek friends. Most youths in Greece at the time were leftist leaning.
Okay.
They wanted to learn French, not English. A lot of them were highly skeptical of the American government, and as they should be.
Well,
and didn't, weren't in love with Americans like we tend to think of people nowadays.
Right.
And so, but Vasilis was different. He loved the Cabanas Hellas. He loved them. He loved Howard the Duck, and he loved, so he wanted to learn English.
Sure.
So his parents asked him, "Okay, you ready to learn another language? Let's send you to the French tutor." He's like, "No, Mom and Dad, I want to learn English." So he learned English by training and by comparing American books to the Cabanas Hellas books in Greece.
Sure.
And he said the translations were horrible, he said. But anyway,
I'm sure.
So he got a job working. He was a comics fan. He got a job working at Mammoth as a translator. And our buddy Vasilis tells his story. So in this book, this is the shocker that Spider-Man is fighting. Now let's get back to, these are just foreign reprints and they're not worth anything. It's just a reprint. You know what, asshole? It's not a reprint because through that simple act of translation, it changes it into a whole brand new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the direct translation of shocker in Greek turns into a sex toy. It's a dildo. Okay. It's a vibrator. It's something that you insert into the orifices of your body. Okay? So Vasilis thought it'd be funny to leave the direct translation instead of culturally translating it.
Yeah.
And so he tells this story about how his editor, and of course Marvel, I mean, where was Marvel? Where were the Marvel lawyers seeking to review the work before it went out? They didn't give a shit.
No.
So
they're at the bank cashing the checks.
They're at the bank cashing checks. So Vasilis gets called into his editor's office and he tells this funny story. His editor's this chain smoking, hard Scrabble Greek. And he walks in there and the room's filled with smoke and he looks at Vasilis and he says, "Vasilis," he's like, "what the fuck are you doing?" And Vasilis looks at him and he goes, "But it's funny."
Yeah. And
so the editor looks at him, takes a drag on his cigarette. He goes, "Yeah, it's pretty funny. Send it to press."
Wow.
And what we have here, what you see, do you see that in green?
Yeah. Yeah.
That little green word, that is basically a sex toy. On the Greek back issue market, this is a famous book. It's loved. Collectors seek it out.
Sure.
This is the famous issue where Spider-Man fights a sex toy. And we're getting into why this part of the hobby is so neat because of this kind of stuff.
Lost in translation.
I mean,
so what kind of numbers are we talking with this book? What kind of
this
value?
book? Actually, because it's interesting, all the different. Remember, we're talking about local indigenous back issue markets.
Yeah.
In Greece, their local back issue market is not very mature, and what I mean by that is they can have books that are extremely rare, but they don't have like they have like book fairs and like swap meets and clubs, but there's think about how the population of Greece. Do you think that the print runs on these Greek books were very high? No, they were not. Okay, so it's not like there's collectors running around all over the place. It's like a lot of these hardcore guys, but the books weren't necessarily valued monetarily. So you might find a super rare, hard to find Cabanas Hellas Greek book for $30 at a Greek swap meet or something. So this book actually, even though it's in high demand in Greece and now in America that people know it exists, you could probably find it for like $50, $100.
Yeah.
But the buying opportunity is the hard part because if you don't, this book does not come on eBay.
How are you supposed to communicate unless
you have to have Greek contacts? You have to have friends in Greece. You have to have a way to enter that market, and that's what we do at our group at Foreign Comic Collector Magazine Facebook group. We bring foreign buyers and sellers together, and I would hope that you put a link in the thing.
Once I'm done, once this is aired, I'm going to put that in the description. So you guys will have a link to that if it's okay, so that you're not, I don't want you overwhelmed in that group.
No. Put it in there. We're always,
I will.
You have to you get approved, go in, you have to answer some questions. If you misbehave, you get kicked out really quick. We keep a tight lid on how we moderate that group. But, so that's the other key part of this is we're getting back to, if you're a collector and you want to get into this, you got to do your homework. You've got to educate yourself. You've got to find the contacts, the sources, or the places like our group on Facebook where you can find this. If you want that book, Ted, I can contact some of my Greek contacts and say, hey, I'm in the lookout for another Spider-Man dildo issue.
We'll talk about that.
My buddy Ted wants one. I mean, it's a great, think about a great like coffee table.
Oh, it is, absolutely. I wouldn't leave it on the coffee table, it'd be sealed. But the one that I really am interested in closing all of this awesomeness that we just had. We went over, I don't care. It's awesome.
Oh, we go another hour, bro.
I'm sure. And I'm going to bring you back. We're going to figure out, we'll figure out a later
we'll
date.
do another
so
one because
we'll
there's still
probably
more
do it
advanced
next year,
stuff we
early
can
next
get
year,
into.
and then figure out where we're
Yeah,
at.
for sure.
The one that I'm really interested in, I know it's taken up most of our space here on the screen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring that back in a second. So this was the first book, the first comic book I ever bought when I was 6.
Woo!
Came out in
Yes.
1977, 78, 6
Yep.
or 7. All right, and this is the one that actually taught me how to read.
Nice.
This is the original. I'm surprised it survived.
Chaykin, classic Chaykin artwork.
It is, and it's
saved Marvel's bacon.
Exactly. And so when I saw this page come across the email, I'm like, it is like that's it. That's the. I mean, this is just out of bragging rights. What I would want to achieve with that. I mean, wow. Even if I couldn't read it, it's like, look at all that. Look at all that. How many people are involved in making the changes and everything? That is just an epic. It's epic.
Okay. So do you see? Okay, leave that up for a second.
Yeah.
Do you see on? Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 rows. So on the 3rd row down, on the very far right, do you see that really weirdly colored one with Arabic scripts?
Yeah.
Okay, so that book right there is the Arabic Star Wars one. It was printed in Lebanon, smack in the middle of the Lebanese Civil War.
Oh my God.
So we're talking about cultural artifacts, right?
Yeah.
This is a cultural artifact. So we know the guy, Henry Matthews, was the translator at Basit el-Rit. He was Flying Carpet was the name of the publisher, I believe. And he's an amazing dude. You want to talk about a guy you need to have an interview with? That guy is an interview with. But anyway, so he was the translator there. And so this little like kind of boutique-y publisher right in the middle of Lebanon. So in the Arabic world, Lebanon was very liberal, right?
Really?
It was, people don't realize this. It was before the Civil War, and it got all torn apart by Israel and Hezbollah and all the different competing factions. It was a very liberal place. It was considered almost like the Paris of the Arabic world.
Very cool. Yeah.
And there was all kinds of boutique publishers doing all kinds of stuff, from printing stuff from all over around the world. This boutique publisher was printing this Star Wars, and they were printing it right smack in the middle of the Lebanese Civil War. So they're printing, how ironic, they're printing a comic book about a space civil war right in the middle of an actual civil war here on Earth. It's just, I mean, it's stunning. And that Star Wars 1 set, it's basically complete. I'm only missing 1 book.
Yep.
It's a Filipino green banner up top.
Wow.
But it has taken me years.
Of course.
Years, and money and time and effort, and it ain't no joke. And some of those books are so difficult to find. I mean, the Indonesian bootleg. I know.
I can imagine.
I've talked to you about that.
Yep.
I mean, there. And okay, so as before we leave, I want to give another interesting thing.
Absolutely.
When we go to so like you go to a con and you pick up a Batman 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
There's something called what I like to call geek gravity. And geek gravity is when you hold a collectible that is extremely powerful, right? Action 1, Batman 1.
Yep.
You know, I've held a Batman 1 in my hands. Just holding it, you're like, you can feel the gravity. You literally have people all around you that are just like, Batman 1. Oh, you know, they zoom in. Now, you can show pictures all day long, right? But it's just a picture on the internet. When you have a big set, you know, this isn't even the whole 129 set that I have, right? This is just some of them. When you have a big set like this, and you have to realize that each one of these books had to survive a journey from around the globe and make its way to this one little part on the planet, and all the shit that book had to go through.
Even surviving before it was shipped. Yeah.
Exactly. It had to survive a civil war. It had to survive civil strife. It had to make it in the mail to
somebody made a decision to get that. Yeah. And the decisions that, it's crazy.
Exactly. It's crazy. The amount of energy that was required to get that set to coexist. These books were never meant to coexist in the same space.
These are 1,000,000 to 1. Yeah.
They were never meant to that. When they did the licensing, they sent it off. It was supposed to live on Mars somewhere. It was never. They were never supposed to find their way together
to a house in
to a house in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Right,
so
right.
What I tell people all the time is big sets have gravity. That even people that aren't comic book collectors, when they go and they see it, they're
you're
like,
a steward.
Holy shit.
You are a steward.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at a lot of the things that I've accumulated over the years with my books and everything else.
Yep.
I absolutely understand that. Absolutely.
And so it's like it makes people go, whoa, how did you, even non-comic book people,
and
how did you get
you
to
understand that? I think really it speaks volumes, because so you've got a collection that is a one-off. You've got a connection with people from around the world that's one-off now, one-to-one, literally.
Yeah.
So now you've got something that I think is more valuable than any collection. You've got an understanding.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you brought that to the interview today.
Yeah,
hopefully a lot of people.
That humanity, that history, that all of that stuff. Well, we're transcending. Yeah, the connection. The simple connection. Just knowing. I mean, Ted, my buddy Rocco said, "Hey, you're ever in Serbia? Well,
that's what I mean.
He likes to drink this Serbian drink that they have.
Yeah.
We talk about drinking all the time. I'm like, oh, I want to try it. They have this liquor that they love there.
And that's what makes the world small.
It's amazing. Yeah.
That's what makes the world small. And that no matter how big walls are, no matter how many people want to keep you away, that is the connection that I think will bring us all a little bit closer.
And makes us a better world, a better planet, better humans.
Period. Yep. And just another reason why I love comic books. Yep. So this has been an opportunity. I think a lot of people you're going to bring. I hope it doesn't ruin the market. I hope it doesn't saturate the market to where not for value. I don't mean for value, but just become a headache. And I don't want that. And this is what this is about. This is about to share this amazing viewpoint on a very niche way of collecting. And I think it's dynamic.
Well, thank you for having me on. I was nervous because I'm like, you're an amazing dude.
No,
and,
I'm just
you're
Ted, man.
Well respected.
And
I was like, I told my wife this morning, I was like, man, I'm more nervous for this interview than any of the ones I've had before.
You have been an absolute. You have been awesome. The thing I like about you is you're real, and you don't. You're authentic. The biggest thing about with TED Talks is I don't want people that are fake. If you're fake, you're not going to make it on here. I don't want that. I want people to see you for who you are, and you're passionate. You're respectful, and you're a realist. You know that things are not meant for everybody, but I think that this is a huge opportunity for a lot of people that they might have a history of maybe being German or maybe Russian, or Arabic or whatever.
Go find
this
your
might
heritage.
Be a connection, and
go find your heritage.
Exactly, or maybe get two different books.
UK editions are awesome.
Exactly, and it's hard to find Welsh ones. Let me tell you, I've looked. I have looked for Welsh comics, and people, it's rare that you find anything in the Welsh heritage.
I don't know of any.
Yeah,
but but you can at least, you're part of the Great Britain heritage. There's so many cool.
There's so many connections, right?
Cool Marvels and
exactly. But in that, I mean, think about that. Since we're heading into the holiday season too, think about that too. If you got a collector that has an American Spider-Man or whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is. Maybe you could find something from an original heritage that your family is from somewhere, Bulgaria, wherever, Norway. And maybe connect.
Go to German eBay. Go to Italian eBay.
Get with you guys on Facebook. Follow the link that we're going to leave.
Get with us. Get with us. Get some help. We're willing to help people. Yeah. Just don't be an asshole. That's all. We
exactly. No assholes allowed. So
no assholes allowed.
I think that's the badge you need to start putting on there.
So. I'll send Kaliman after your ass.
Thank you, man. Stick around. We'll talk after the show. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows. Where can they all find you again? One more time before we.
On Facebook, I'm just who I am, Matthew Roybal on Facebook. Mm-hmm. But our group is Foreign Comic Collector Magazine, FCC official group. You can find it on Facebook. Go on there, join our group. And then on YouTube, Global Comic Safari. There's also Global Comics Calling. There's on YouTube, you can find our podcast where we do a lot of audio shows.
Yep.
And Global Comic Safari, we do set shows, we do pickup shows, and we just kind of hang out on there. We've slowed down a little bit on the output.
Sure. But
life
it's still
gets
awesome.
in the way, but it's still all there. Yeah, the content's all there.
Awesome.
And then you can find me on YouTube as Matthew Roybal. I do little short little things as well.
And I'll back you 100%. You're part of Ted's tribe, you know that. So I will totally suggest you go to YouTube. See everything that they're doing because it's cool because it's one-on-one. You're just talking about the product and what it is and the history of it. It's awesome. It's awesome. I definitely recommend it. And I think you guys should look into it. Thank you.
Ted.
Thank you. Thank you. Stick around. Like I said, I'll close out the interview and check out everything Matt's doing. Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you guys understand now the excitement. It might not be for everybody. And like I said, it's niche, but boy, I'm digging it. I think that there's a huge market there. And it's a global economy. If anybody doesn't understand that by now, if COVID has not taught us one thing about being global, we're all interconnected. We are, period. We're all interconnected. So when you're looking at it from a standpoint of purchasing a book, not to take somebody for a ride, I'm not saying that, but when you're looking at it, purchasing a book from out of the country or something along that side, getting plugged into what Matt does, I mean, it's an amazing thing. But to help somebody else out that might, they could use American dollars. There's nothing wrong with that. So see if there's some way that maybe you can make the world just a little bit smaller that way too, and you become a collector. I think in this genre, it's just amazing. Thank you guys for stopping in. I look forward to seeing everybody real soon. We've got a lot going on with TED Talks towards the end of the year. We got a lot going on next year. I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you for stopping in, giving me some of your time. And now you know a little bit more about Matt Roybal. Check out what he's doing. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, guys. Be safe. Do something good for somebody.